Hello collectors and welcome to my review of the SH MonsterArts Heavily Armed Type High Mobility Type Kiryu. Since I'm in America and that's too much, I'm just going to go ahead and call him Kiryu. This Bandai Premium Webshop exclusive is a retooling of the previously released MFS3 Type 3 Kiryu, which was quite a hot release. But for some reason there are some people who are on the fence with this one, either because they own the first release or think this release is just a repaint. Well, let's set the mumbo-jumbo aside and take a look to see whether or not it's worth adding into your collection. If there's one thing Bandai can do extremely well, it's absolutely nailing robot figures. Specifically, in the looks department, this Kiryu, simply great. All of the new parts are sculpted really well, and the new gunmetal, weather, whatever you would like to call it, paint job looks very stunning. However, the decrease in die-cast parts used on this figure, it's rather sad. First, the head, where the paint application looks great and you can really see the fine details. Opening the mouth, the teeth are a nice, fantastic touch to Kiryu, and if you look inside, you can see the nodes for Kiryu's beam attack, which is a very, very nice sculpt touch. Lots of attention to detail here. Focusing in on Kiryu's chest, you can see the MFS3 with the asterisk, which looks nice and crisp. There's no slop there at all. Opening the doors, or hatches, whatever you want to call them on Kiryu's chest, which also have a nice sculpt to them, you can see the details on the inside are impressively crisp, and they don't look soft at all. This is really a testament to how well this thing is sculpted. Here's the new battle-damaged arm, which looks bitchin'. And the red paint here, there's no slop at all, which is surprising to see considering some of the paint quality issues I've been having with some Bandai figures lately. And if you turn the arm around, you can see the inner turbine, which has the tiniest of details, which, again, is a testament to the quality of the sculpt of this figure. Here's a look at the waist, where you can see the nice detailings for the grooves and the mechanical parts here and there. You can see the sculpt details are nice and fresh. Now the thighs, where you can really see the shading here for the paint. It looks absolutely stunning in hand. I'm really crazy over that dark silver metallic look, specifically right here along the hatches, for the boosters in the thighs. The black parts of Kiryu, specifically on the upper thigh, have those little tubes or wires or whatever sculpted into them, which really does show the attention to detail this figure has. Overall, I mean, you can definitely tell that the sculpt on this guy is awesome. Taking a look at the lower part of the legs, you can see that the paint detail here for the little triangles looks very nice, and you can tell that the detailing is still kept up throughout the figure. You can even see those little wires or tubes still sculpted into there. And moving down to the feet, this would be the only place where you will find die-cast parts on this guy. Yeah, the feet are die-cast parts, and the ankles are die-cast parts. I stuck this bad boy in the freezer for a good, I'd say 10-15 minutes, and this was the only area that got the typical die-cast cold. And if you do have other figures made of die-cast, and this just isn't your first one, you know the exact type of cold that I'm talking about. So if there would be any more die-cast parts used on this figure, which I totally doubt, they did a damn good job of hiding it, because no other part feels like the typical metal of die-cast. Here's a quick rundown of the back of Kiryu, so you can appreciate the details. Bandai really knocked the sculpt out of the park with this one, and I really cannot stress that enough. Bravo. And it just looks phenomenal overall, even in the areas where you're hardly looking at this figure. And finally, a close-up look at the tail, where you can definitely see that the sculpt and paint detail is identical to the rest of the figure. Now, when this figure was announced, a bunch of apes immediately jumped on this and groaned, "Oh, another repaint, the line is doomed, it's going nowhere." But the truth is, this design is different from the first Kiryu release, and it does have newly sculpted parts. It's not just a repaint. To show you where these new parts are at, let me bring in a friend here, so I can give you a side-by-side comparison. I'm just going to do a quick glance over of the different parts, because you should be able to tell what's new and what's not just by looking at it, but there are a few parts which I do want to comment on. First, the most obvious difference between the two would be the chest, since they're packing different weapons. But it's not just a small part swap, since any very, very close observer will notice that right behind the weapon on the chest, there's that little seam line which just looks like they could swap it out. No. The chest is entirely different. Actually, the whole entire torso is different. Because if you specifically look here, you'll notice that those sculpt marks are entirely different. This is just a little rectangle with a line in it, while this is a rectangle with a whole bunch of dots. And if you lift up the arms, you'll notice that this area down here, underneath the arm, by the armpit, is entirely different too. And if you'll notice right there, right by the bottom hatch, those little rectangles are different too. Continuing on with this, if you take a look at the back, let me move the arms out of the way here. Aside from just a paint difference, you'll notice the areas by the boosters are different too, including the fact that the boosters themselves have an entirely different sculpt. And then moving down from there, you'll notice that this little floaty piece on both of them, it has a new sculpt too. And of course, it goes without saying, this battle-damaged arm on the new Kiryu is, well, new. The thighs, for the most part, remain unchanged, but as you'll notice as I make a comment in the articulation section, the thigh hatches, there seems to be just a little bit of a difference in the fact that these are smaller just enough that there's a slit where you can actually put your nail in, as opposed to these, which sit mostly flush down here. And to one final comment I'll make, the tail tip for the heavy arms Kiryu is different from the original Kiryu in that the tail tip is open as opposed to the first one, which is closed. And if you really wanted to, you could just do a simple part swap. So overall, not only is this Kiryu a different sculpt from the first in quite a few places, but it looks very nice too. And I dig the paint scheme a whole lot. As someone who owns the first Kiryu, I'd say this guy looks different enough to deserve a spot on your shelf, regardless if you have the first. In the articulation department, this Kiryu really doesn't bring anything new to the table, considering that, well, there are a lot of reused parts from the old Kiryu on this one. So if you do have the first Kiryu released in the SH MonsterArts line, you pretty much know what you're going to be getting into with this guy. However, if you don't have a Kiryu at all, you are in for a pleasant surprise. To begin with the head, we have the jaw here. It's on a hinge. As you can see, it opens and closes, but really, to appreciate how much the jaw opens and closes, you have to look at the head without it attached to the neck, because as you can see here, it really opens up. Yeah, there's pretty much nothing blocking the hinge aside from the neck here. So if you can get creative with positioning Kiryu's head, you're going to be able to get that thing to open very wide. Now, moving on from there, the actual head itself is attached to the neck on a ball joint. So you're going to be able to get Kiryu to look around, look up and down. You're going to be able to get the head to move around pretty much any direction you want. From there are other ball joints in the neck. So you're going to be able to get him to rock his neck around and pretty much twist and turn however you want. Moving down from the neck, we have the shoulders, which are attached into the body on a ball joint. Both of them are, as you can see here. And then there's another ball joint in there which allows you to move the arm around like so. So you're basically going to be able to spin the arm around in pretty much any way you want, with no real restriction. And there is a hinge here, which allows you to move the arm up and down like so, or, if you look at it this way, in and out. Now for this arm over here, the battle-damaged arm, you'll notice that unfortunately this giant spike here does block the articulation a bit, so you're not going to be able to get it to move in and out, forward and back, up and down as much as you would like, but I mean that's just simply a design flaw, which really, they can't work around that. Moving down from there, right here where the elbow and bicep meet, there's a ball joint, so you can rock the forearm around like so, and you can spin it around. And then here, there is a hinge where the forearm and elbow meet. So you're going to be able to move the elbow region in pretty much any way you want to. You can swivel it, you can hinge it, you can ball joint it. Yeah, the movement's pretty great. And then moving down to the wrist, there is a swivel hinge combo, or a ball hinge as some like to refer to it. But unfortunately, because of this little wristband here on Kiryu's forearm, you're not really going to be able to get too much movement out of the hand aside from basically just swiveling it around. Now, the new hand here, you're going to be able to get a lot more movement out of because, well, the joint is just a little bit bigger than the wrist on the other arm. As you can see here, there's a lot more flexibility here with this joint. The main body of Kiryu also has some pretty sweet articulation. You have the super hyper ultra maser cannon of death on the chest, which has 3 doors which open and close on hinges, as you can see here. Yeah, Really interesting. And then we have an ab crunch here, which is on a ball joint, which you can get Kiryu to pretty much twist to the side entirely in both directions, which is pretty sweet. Moving to the back of Kiryu here momentarily, we have these two boosters here, which are on a swivel hinge combo, because you can swivel them, and you can move them in a hinge motion, like so. Get a better view of that for you there. Moving down to Kiryu's legs, the hips are on ball joints, but unfortunately because of the sculpting of the actual upper thigh area, you're not going to be able to get too much movement out of them in terms of splaying the legs out, but you can get them to go forward and back quite a bit. However, you have this little plastic tube here, which plugs into this area. I don't know what you would technically call that. And in my first Kiryu review, I said that that might break. No, it doesn't break. That just pops out if you push too far forward or back, and it's just a royal pain in the ass to pop it back in. So, once again, you have ball jointed hips, which are pretty nice. You have no pull down movement, which is, I guess you could say, a little bit of a shame, but it's not that big of a deal. From there, you have hidden panels on the side of the thigh here, which are on hinges. See if I can get it open. Yeah, these panels are much easier to open on the heavy arms Kiryu than the first Kiryu for me. And then you have these little boosters here, which are on swivels, which allow you to push them forward and back like so, which is pretty nice. And they also slide. I just found this out, so you can extend them if you want to, or you can make them a little smaller. All right, so that's enough there. Now we have the knee joints. They are on a double hinge, so you can move them like so. Not too much in terms of range of movement, but it definitely is something to write home about because, well, it's articulated. Then you have the ankle guard here, which seems to be on a swivel. Just moves ever so slightly. Really, there's no reason for that to be there. I guess it's just for show. And then you have the ankle joints, which use the same genius engineering that the first Kiryu had. So you have a hinge, which is working right there. You can see that, which allows you to pull the foot forward like so. And then the actual foot is attached into the ankle on a ball joint, as you can see. So you can spin the foot around if you want to. You can give it the ankle rocker movement, which is pretty nice. And this whole connection is made of die cast. So you're going to be able to get Kiryu into some pretty interesting poses if you really put your mind to it. And finally on Kiryu, you have the tail, which is nothing but ball joints. So you're going to be able to get the tail to move in pretty much any pose you want. It's not really that restricted, except for sometimes, yeah, you're going to have this issue where the tail will like to pop out of a socket somewhere, so just be careful there. It's all hard plastic, so if that does happen, don't force the dorsal plates too hard or you may cause them to snap. And you pretty much have ball joints all the way up until here, this section right here, because that is technically an accessory which is detached in the box. So in short, this version of Kiryu is definitely the same articulated monster that the first Kiryu is. There's not really that much of a change, but if you get really creative, this thing is an absolute blast to fiddle around with, and something you can put into a lot of creative poses. This Kiryu pretty much comes with everything you would need for a solid representation of the Tokyo SOS Kiryu. Sadly, however, it doesn't come with effect parts, but the bonus to this is if you have the original Kiryu release, then you're going to be able to swap parts between the two releases. First up for the accessories, you got a little sneak peek at this earlier when I showed you the jaw articulation, but you have the battle-damaged head for Kiryu. Very nicely done in terms of the sculpt, and you have this Terminator-esque eye here, which is very nicely done. And swapping the head out, in general principle, it's easy, but in practice, it's hard if you're not very well coordinated. The reason I say this is that you saw those dangly tubes there coming off of the battle-damaged head? Yeah, you have to line those up with the neck of Kiryu. So to swap out the head, you just have to grab the currently attached head and pop it off. That's not hard. And then you have these two holes here on the side of the neck, right here, where you have to line those tubes up. And on top of that, before I go on, you have this piece here, which is just a floating piece to conceal the ball joint. And that likes to pop off, and then yeah, it can just be fiddly. But anyway, you have to line the tubes up. And if you're sort of uncoordinated like I am, this can be a pain. And then you have to line the ball joint up with the base of the head. And then if you get lucky, there we go. Now it's attached. And as you can see here, Kiryu is now battle damaged. But remember how I said if you own the previous Kiryu, you can have a bit more fun with it? Well, taking a page out of the first Kiryu's book, both the battle damaged head and the normal head use the same eye swapping feature that the first Kiryu has. That's right. You can pop the eyes off. And you can pop the first Kiryu's eyes onto this one. So now you can have a Berserk battle damaged Kiryu. And then there's more to that, because if you really want to, you can take the first Kiryu, pop the eyes off of that one, and you can take the battle damaged eyes and put it onto there. Like that. So if you want a normal head with a battle damaged eye, you can do that. And the best part is, since the heads are practically the same, you can swap out the battle damaged head onto the normal Kiryu's body. So yeah, there's a lot of interchangeability there, and there are tons of display options for you. Up next, we have the swappable drill part for Kiryu's right hand. As you can see here, it's sculpted pretty well, minimal paint application, and contrary to the initial reports from a few reviewers, this is not made of die-cast at all. This is just very, very hard plastic, and it is very sharp. Think Series 1 knife head from NECA sharp. You can pretty much kill someone with this if you really wanted to. And swapping this out for the hand part is super easy to do. You have your right hand here for Kiryu. You grab it, pop it out, take the drill, and pop it in. And in terms of articulation, you're just going to get it to spin. No sort of movement other than that. But still, I mean, I don't know what kind of movement you would want. Moving on from there, we have the wrist attachment rail guns. As you can see, they're pretty much just one color with very, very minimal paint applications, which would just be different grays and silvers. And yeah, it's sculpted pretty well. You have this plastic tube here, which unlike the first Kiryu's, it's not a rigid plastic, so you really shouldn't break it. I mean, if you break it, then you're doing something wrong with this, because it's very, very flexible. It seems like it would be very forgiving. And putting this onto Kiryu, it's super easy to do. First off, by Kiryu's elbow, you have this little teeny tiny peg here, which you just have to grip ever so carefully and pop out just like that. Make sure you don't lose it. And then you have this plug here, which just slides in to where that one was. And you have this little nub or nipple, whatever you would prefer to call it. And you have this little indent in Kiryu's arm. All you have to do is just pop it into the arm. And like so, Kiryu's ready to shoot at some stuff. But what's really cool is that you have that little indent on both parts of the arm, as you can see there. So if you really wanted to, instead of using one railgun per arm, you can double up. Like so. And Kiryu's right arm is basically ready to kill anything in the entire universe. But wait, that's not all. Once again, if you have the original Kiryu, the mazer blades you can pop onto that Kiryu's forearms can be used on this Kiryu. And if you really want to get crazy, you can definitely turn this into a super heavy arms version by using both on the top of the forearms and on the bottom of the forearms. So, again, super crazy interchangeability here. And last up for the accessories, we have this Kiryu's backpack unit, as you can see here, and it is sculpted very well. With some nice paint applications, it does match the gunmetal color of the Tokyo SOS Kiryu. And there is some articulation to it. You have these back parts here, which can bend, like so. And what's really cool is, if you've seen the movie, then this backpack unit can actually disassemble, and Kiryu is able to use the thrusters on the back to shoot off the cannons towards Godzilla. And, well, you can separate them, like so. You have a little tab which slides in here, and super easy to do. And if you have a support arm or something, you can get a little claw, and you can pose it as if he's shooting off the cannons, if you really wanted to. And attaching this onto Kiryu's back, it's easy to do, but I find it best to first disassemble it, like so. So this way you don't run the risk of breaking anything. So, on Kiryu's back here, you have this one dorsal plate right at the bottom of his neck. All you got to do is just be very gentle and just pop it off, like so. And you take the middle part to the backpack unit, and you just work it in ever so gently, like so. It clips in, and then you have the little boosters here, or the cannons to be technical, and you just slide them into the tab. You push the thrusters in the back down, and now Kiryu is ready to go into battle. Now, unfortunately, because of the way this Kiryu is designed, because the chest is retooled, you can't use the original blue backpack unit from the first Kiryu on this one. However, because of a technicality, you can use this backpack unit on the original Kiryu because that dorsal plate at the base of the neck is removable on the first Kiryu. So if you want to get creative and use this backpack unit on that one, you're good to go. As I was saying before, this Kiryu comes with all of the accessories you would truly need except for effect parts, which is still sort of pissing me off, and there's a lot of interchangeability with the original Kiryu release. If you're looking for a very expressive Kiryu, or a Kiryu with a lot of different display options, this one, it's a very solid choice just on its own. But if you have the original Kiryu release, your display options double. This is such a great figure in this area. In terms of sizing, Kiryu is pretty much your average 6-inch scale Mecha Godzilla. First up, here's Kiryu alongside some Ultra Acts. Next up, alongside some of NECA's Pacific Rim figures. Next up, alongside some of NECA's Godzillas. Next up, here's Kiryu alongside some Godzillas in the SH MonsterArts line. Here's Kiryu alongside some of the other SH MonsterArts kaiju which you may have in your collection. And finally, alongside some other 6-inch Mecha Godzillas which you may have in your collection. So as you can see, the Heavy Arms Kiryu is in the 6-inch scale, and chances are it should be able to sneak onto your shelf just fine enough. So, buy it now, skip it, or wait for a deal. The paint and sculpt are both just wonderful. Not much more can be said than that. And the articulation is great. But the limited hips, well, that sucks. Plain and simple. Also, the accessories are great, and we pretty much get everything this Kiryu needs, except for effect parts. In short, this figure is awesome, no doubt, and you should at least toy with the idea of owning it, even if you have the first Kiryu. If you don't have the first one, well, you should probably already have this one on the way to you. However, at $125 for MSRP, the price is a bit much for what you get. Yes, there are new parts and slight retoolings here and there, but there are plenty of reused parts and a decrease in the amount of die-cast parts. No matter how you spin it, defend it, slice it, whatever, it is a pretty penny, and it's a nice figure, but it's tough to say that it's worth it at MSRP. I say nab this, but try to get it for as cheap as you can.